This is Empowered TV with Dr. Cindy Trimm. I'm Pastor Ryan, and in today's message, we're talking about how you can expand your influence. Dr. Trimm is in her latest series, The Leader's Logic, where we have been looking at some of the parables that Jesus taught on leadership. Listen, all of us are called to lead in one capacity or another. Whether you're a supervisor on your job, a business owner, a pastor, or a stay-at-home mom, we are all called to lead. The question is, can we be doing more, and how? Let's just take the zip code where you live. Is that community any different now than when you first moved there? If we are going to change the world, we have to start right where we're at. So I want you to get ready and fasten your seatbelts, because we are going to challenge you in your faith so that you can move beyond your comfort zone. While I've got your attention, let me tell you about some of our annual events. In July, we host a week-long ministry intensive training. It's called Kingdom School of Ministry. There, we teach 8 power-packed courses that help you to tap into your leadership potential and understand your purpose in God's kingdom. Also, don't miss our End Your Year Strong Empowerment Summit at the end of every year. It's our annual leadership conference where we bring in the best of speakers and worship artists for a time of strategy, inspiration, and refreshing. You can get more information on these events and when Dr. Trimm is going to be speaking at an event near you on the Cindy Trimm Ministries app. Go to the App Store today and download this free app filled with resources, sermons, and so much more. Listen, all of this is made possible because of the generous support of our ministry partners. Every financial gift sown into the ministry goes right into our mission of bringing hope to the hopeless and healing to the hurting souls everywhere. Would you consider supporting this ministry? Well, you can do so by giving one time right now or setting up an auto draft of any amount that will be given every single month. You can give now by clicking the link in the description on our app or at cindytrimministries.org/give. Thank you for your obedience and commitment to helping us reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom. Well, hit that share button right now and leave your comments below to let us know how this message is impacting your life. The title of this message is Expanding Your Influence. So let's jump right into that message now.
All right, this one we're going to talk about finally the parable of the leaven. And this is going to be very, very exciting. And I really want you to hear this message because it's going to find its relevance to all of us. All of us either fly in airplanes, or we shop in grocery stores, or we're pumping our gas. And that's where, we're doing our day-to-day activities where the kingdom is going to be not able to be perceived, imperceptible. And what God is actually doing while you're there, and how he can really influence people. I'm going to give an example of this. They're filming now, but I'm going to give you this example, and then I'm going to go directly into teaching. I was just a shopper in a store, just going around shopping, and there's a whole bunch of other individuals that are shopping as well. And I just met a lady who was also shopping. We started talking, and she said, "I just feel so good around you." And we started sharing, and I let her share her story. Then another shopper came, and we started sharing just stories about clothes, what we like, what we didn't like, where we shop, when we shop. And then another person came, and then eventually it was this whole woman's thing that was going on. And then eventually they asked me, what do you do? Because, all of us, we want to be your BFF, and so, and we were all from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, and we were all, so I told them a little bit about what I was doing, and then the lady, the cashier came and wanted to find out, are you ladies actually going to buy anything? But she came, and it was right there, we started talking, and without me saying, I'm going to prophesy into your life, I never said that. I just said, you strike me as being so-and-so. And I began to talk to her. She started crying. And then everybody's looking like you're looking. And they were like, well, what do you see in me? And so I began to talk to her, and she cried. And then, you know, me next, me next. And we chatted and we talked. And then they said to me, so are you like a psychic or something like that? And I said, no, actually not. I'm a minister of God. And they said, we knew it was something different about you. And it started out with just a conversation on woman stuff. And so we're introduced to this amazing, amazing parable. It's about woman stuff. It's about where in Palestine the women would be baking bread, and why Jesus would choose this story. I believe it's phenomenal because he really hammers in the kingdom of heaven and its influence, but it influences in stealth mode. And it opens up in Matthew 13, 33 to 34, and another parable spake he unto them. The kingdom of heaven is likened unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole thing was leavened. So the leaven here stands for the imperceptibility or influence and power of the kingdom. We cannot see it working, but it is working all the time. And it has the same characteristics of yeast. We call it yeast today, but they call it leaven, that is working and growing. It's working all the time. And so this speaks about the imperceptibility of the power of the kingdom of God. So God now shifts his object lessons from the agriculture and horticulture kind of symbolism, and he moves into the domestic. Now, the Pharisees and scribes would have been irritated with this teaching because they were patriotic, and they were not matriotic. They felt that women were just as important as furniture or cattle, and they didn't have any real worth or value unless they were producing boy children, because they were hoping that God would use the womb of their wife to produce the Messiah. So they didn't have much value for women. So Christ uses the leaven that a woman would take and put in a large measure of flour dough. So the religious folk and the Pharisees, they objected to this illustration. Why couldn't you use something more masculine than feminine? And so this was an irritation to them, because they had so much prejudice and depreciation for women and their value. And so Jesus was simply saying, you know, you thought the kingdom of heaven was going to come with pomp and circumstance, and we were going to take over all the Roman Empire. But he said it's not going to be like that. It's just going to be like leaven, and it's not going to be half baked, it's not going to be half risen, and it's not going to be mixed with anything that is religion, but it's going to still have this transformative power. And this power is not going to be able to be stopped, and it's not going to be mitigated by anything. So when you think about leaven, or when you think about yeast, you think about something that is very, very powerful, and you're mixing this yeast. You're mixing it with the butter, and you're mixing it with the water and the salt, and you're mixing it with anything else that they're using in order to make this bread, or in order to make this dough. And the kingdom of heaven is operating by the resurrection power of Jesus. And that cannot be stopped. It's a force, it's an invisible force, and it's going to endure to the end of the world. So this is about the influence of the kingdom, that it impacts and it penetrates everything it touches, and it changes its character and nature. Butter doesn't make yeast slippery. Water doesn't make yeast wet, but the yeast itself changes the nature and character of everything that it touches until it takes on the character and nature of yeast. Everything puffs up around it because of its influence, and it's imperceptible. So here's the characteristics of yeast, and then we can show you the characteristics of the kingdom of God moving through you and the kingdom of God in you. When God plants you, you don't always have to announce anything. Eventually, people are going to see, they're going to be influenced by you. I was in government, and I had a lot of cocktail parties. So it was every week, all the time, with all kinds of people, under every kind of circumstance. I was very close to the governor. The governor was very close to the queen. And at all the birthday parties, I was at Prince Andrew's birthday party. I did dinner with her sister. I've had crumpets with the Queen of England. I've been all over, all the who's who. And it was always all the who's who around the world. And it was always cocktail parties. My friends owned islands, and we would jump in a boat and cruise to the island and have dinner and cruise back from the island. It was that kind of vibe. And so I remember every time going to cocktail parties, I would be the only one holding a glass of Perrier water with Rose's lime, just lime oil. And that was my drink of choice. And everybody else would have cocktails and whiskey and all of the hard drinks and whatever else they were having. And they couldn't understand, you know, and they would say to me, well, there's nothing wrong with drinking wine. Even Jesus drank wine. He turned water into wine, you know, and they kept going. And I said, you know, I broke it down. This is what I said to them. Every time you consume alcohol, there are cells in your brain that dies, and the brain is the only part of the body that doesn't recreate cells. And I could tell you've had one drink too many. That's what I used to tell them. And I never went into, oh, I'm a Christian, I don't drink. I was in stealth mode. And you know, I moved around, and they greeted me. And before I left my tenure of my being in government, my tenure as government, before I left, the hottest thing at the cocktail party was what? Perrier with Rose's lime. And I never once said, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't smoke. I was in stealth mode, and they watched me. And they would come to me, and then they would start sharing, you know, their problems, and I would counsel them. And I was on assignment, but my assignment was not to be a preacher. It was to be a government official, a diplomat. That was my assignment. And so I carried myself as a diplomat. I remember I was at a dinner party, and when you dine with royalty, usually they have a seat that is empty, and if it depends on what the dinner is all about, they may move around the table. They may move, so you might be moved over, and one of the royalties would sit with you. So I was at Prince Andrew's birthday party. A friend of mine, a governor was throwing the party. A few of us was invited. So we were sitting around the table, and you had to greet. So you had the receiving line, and then when he walked by, you usually curtsy. And at that time, I felt like I ain't curtsying to anybody. So he walked by, everybody curtsied, everybody bow. It's a pleasure to meet you. If they put out your hand, they shake it. If they don't, then you just bow or you curtsy. That's the protocol. So when he came by me, I stood like this. I didn't curtsy. I said, how are you? And it's a pleasure to meet you. And then he went by, and then he came back. He said, what's your name? I said, my name is Cindy Trimm. He said, okay. And so during the dinner, he always came back to me. So he was always sitting next to me. We were always talking. And then we went out, we played putt-putt golf together until my governor friend came and said, Cindy, you can keep hugging His Majesty. I said, I am not hogging His Majesty. His Majesty is hogging me. And he said, it's just something about you. I can't put my finger on it. I was in stealth mode. It wasn't necessary for me to say, oh, I'm a born-again believer, everybody else around here are heathens. Wasn't necessary. I was in stealth mode. And sometimes it's what people feel around you. It's how you carry yourself. And this is what yeast does. The kingdom of heaven is likened unto leaven. Leaven is a reflection of the king's nature through a person. We don't see God, but we see the effects of God. It's the intent of the message of the king and his kingdom. Here the kingdom is pictured as yeast. It's multiplying quietly. It's permeating quietly, and it's affecting everybody it contacts. There were some people that interpreted and suggest that since leaven is nearly always symbol of evil, it carries the connotation here that God is putting a twist. What was meant for evil, God turns it into good. It's like a twist. There are some scriptures that said a little leaven leaveth the whole lump, but we're talking about something that is evil. But here, Jesus takes something that people believe is evil. And it's interesting, when I meditated on this particular text, now Christians are being persecuted almost as if we're evil. But as long as you understand that we cannot be stopped, the movement of the kingdom is a movement that cannot be stopped. You can persecute us, but the kingdom is still going to prevail. It's still going to grow. We are still going to affect changes in every system. The yeast is small, it's insignificant until it's placed in the right environment. It doesn't do anything as long as yeast is in that pack. It just lays there. You don't see the effects of it. You can see its nature. You can see its character. It's just laying there. And a lot of times, when we're in church and when we're sitting, we really can see what you can do until God places you in the right environment. And then, in order for it to be activated, you got to put yeast in hot water. And I love this because you can't be in a cool environment or a cold environment. You've got to be in an environment that's filled with passion. And whatever situation you're in, when you are in the middle of hot water, that's when the full measure of the kingdom finds expression. When you think of Daniel in the lion's den, when you think of the 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace, when you think of Esther in Persia, in the midst of being threatened by Haman's strategy for ethnic cleansing, when you deal with Paul and Silas, that's when you begin to see the kingdom of heaven affecting change. In your worst moments, in your hottest battles, in your greatest crises, that's when the kingdom is going to start finding expression. On your job, in your domestic affairs, in your marriage, when things are heating up and when things seem like they're worst, that's when the kingdom of heaven is actually going to manifest itself. The yeast is not affected or not intimidated by the characteristics of the other ingredients. The yeast don't say, oh, I wish I was slippery like butter. I wish I was wet like water. I wish I was dry like flour. The yeast just jumps in there and does what yeast does. It takes over. So we're not here to do anything else but to take over. It takes over. I'm not afraid of your temperament, your personality, your assignment, or what you're doing. I'm here to pervade the dough. I'm here to make it rise. Let it rise, let it rise, let it rise. That's what yeast does. And you know what? It spreads its love until everything it touches takes on its character. The water doesn't remain on the bottom and say, I ain't rising. The salt doesn't say, I'm just going to stay here and be salty. The rest of you go. It does not have any other choice but to rise along and to take on the character of the yeast. Let me make an application. God places you in your family, in your community, in your industry, in your organization, in your ministry to be yeast. And it only takes a little to affect everything around it. 1 Corinthians 5:6, know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Just takes a little. That yeast causes the flour, the butter, the sugar to take on its nature, but it does not take on the nature of the flour, the butter, and the sugar. God should be able to place you in any environment, in any culture, and you become the agent of change there. Yeast is an agent of change, and so are you. We are change agents, and we are changing environments. We are changing cultures. We are bringing new models to the table because God has planted us in a world that needs our influence. And we do it as citizens of the kingdom of heaven because we are the leaven that God has needed and needs, pun intended, in the world. The world needs us because it needs us. Leaven.